Digital 410 Media proudly presents the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast with your hosts, Don Abernathy, Jeff Copsetta, and Dennis Blocker.
What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast, your favorite World War II based podcast, and we have a good show for you tonight. But real quick, before we get to that, I just want to remind you all, thank you for your continued support of the podcast. We are growing. We see it. We're getting the emails. You know, Dennis, I feel that sometimes we forget the mail call. We don't mention it enough. We oftentimes forget it, and so we have new fans who don't know. If you want to reach out to us, send us an email. Mail call at WTSPWorldWar2.com. That's WTSPWWII.com. Send us anything. Thoughts, complaints, suggestions. Perhaps Absolutely. There's a topic like young Andrew here, which we're going to introduce shortly, who has something he wants to share. Something he says, hey, I got this really cool information. I know I can talk about it for an hour because I got a passion for it. Let me come on and share with the audience. And we're like, what? An episode we don't have to do research? Come on down. You're the next contestant on What's the Scuttlebutt. So if you are that way, look, Jeff and I have talked about it. One of the great things about living history in World War II is we cannot explain why little things bite onto us. I can't explain to you why I have 17 canteens in my garage. It's just a thing I like. I can't explain why I have 7-in-1 helmets surrounding me. It's just a thing I like. Jeff loves planes. Dennis has his own thing. Andrew has his own thing. So if you have your own thing, bring it to the show. Email us at mailcall@WTSPWorldWar2.com. And after you send that email, stay on our website or head over to our website, click on the Patreon link, sign up and subscribe. At the end of this month, we're giving away this. See that yellow stripe? And across the top of every single page, some poor intern at the publishing house had to stamp every single page with a rubber stamp that says not for resale. So we're going to give this away at the end of the month. All you have to do is be an active subscriber. Doesn't matter which tier, the $1, the $3, the $750 a month. Sign up and subscribe at the end of the month. All active subscribers, except for the person who won last time, because that wouldn't be fair, is entered in to win this book, and we'll send you some stickers as well. And last plug, YouTube.com, D410 Media. You can find our content. We're slowly uploading shortened video versions of our podcast so you guys can see who we're talking to. And without any further ado, Dennis, why don't you take it away?
Yeah, sure. You know, exactly what you were talking about. Please send in your emails, messages. Like, we want to know what's on your mind. And the guest we have tonight is a direct result of that call out, you know. And one thing that we're all very passionate about as historians and, you know, impressionists of World War II is making sure that, and one thing I really enjoy is that we all have the same mindset on this, all three of us, is making sure that we're doing everything we can to bring along the next generation of historians who are in their 20s and early 30s, who are just as passionate, and they've got subjects that they've latched onto. So we don't want the history to disappear, and the young man we're having tonight is going to make sure that one facet of that is definitely not going to disappear. And it's such a unique story, and I'm really excited about it. It's actually takes place just south of me, and so I got to talk to Andrew and on the phone. We had a nice conversation that night, and I was super impressed. Yeah, this is a young man who has done his homework, and you are going to see that tonight. So, Andrew, thank you. Thank you so much for...
Absolutely. And Don and Dennis, I can't thank you enough for letting me hop on tonight. It's an honor to be on your podcast. I'm sure, avid World War II fan listens to this. I know I'm guilty of it sometimes at work when I got a slow or busy day. I turn this on and I listen to it. It makes a day go by faster. And you guys have a wide range of topics that it never gets old. So thank you very much.
Well, I greatly appreciate that, and we appreciate you coming on. You know the format, so before we get into the topic, why don't you explain to our audience how you kind of got bit by the history bug and how this particular topic found its way to you and what drove you to find out more information to lead you to where we are today?
Absolutely. So I grew up on a 7-generation family farm in the Lower Peninsula of Michigan. And ever since I was a kid, I don't know if people would let their kids do this now, but my dad was a very big history fan. And my vacations were never to the beach or, all that. We were tromping Civil War battlefields when I was a kid. And then
Besides, a Michigander can only go to Cedar Point so many times.
Exactly. Yeah. And it was, I'd probably been to Gettysburg probably 20 times or more. And I was bit by that bug at an early age. My first movies that I watched when I was a kid, Saving Private Ryan, The Patriot, it's like, I don't know about today, but I really enjoyed that stuff. And so I remember, my entrance as a kid was Band of Brothers and like Saving Private Ryan. So all I knew was the European theater. My great grandfather served with an ordnance company in Europe. I never got to meet him, but he died about 38 years before I was born. So my dad never knew him, but we had a box of his stuff growing up. It was all of his war medals. He had PTSD when he got out of the war, kind of rough life, and it doesn't take away from what he did, but his stuff was pushed to the side. And my dad, like I said, was big into history, so he got that stuff. And we reconnected with that side of the family, and we had all of his war letters, and it showed what kind of person he was. Just a down to earth, oldest of 13 type guy, and just a great story. And so where I got into this was when the Pacific miniseries came out, which I know you guys are well versed on, with Mr. Sledge being a part of your show and whatnot. But when that came out, I was like, there's another side of this war here. And so I looked for everything Pacific related. I was in the 6th grade at the time, and Flags of Our Fathers came across my radar, and I instantly was infatuated with that story. And just James Bradley did a fantastic job getting to know the key characters there and whatnot. And I couldn't tell you what got me to Harlan Block, the figure at the far end base of the pole, but he grew up on a farm like I did. He played football. I'm a big football guy, played in high school, and it was a smaller town in Texas, from what my research states. And I grew up in a very small town. I graduated with 57 kids. And so we had a connection like that. And so that, I would say, the long story short, that I saw a lot of similarities there. And I always wanted to write a book about him. I couldn't tell you why, because, there's been a lot written on the subject. But, there's been some changes in the flag raising picture and whatnot. But at the end, to cap this all off, during the pandemic, my cousin was working down in Corpus Christi as a welding inspector. And I was home from Michigan State University, and my aunt and myself and went to visit him, and they took me down to Weslaco in February of 2021. And I kept seeing these 8 guys everywhere everywhere I went. And I'm like, I want to know about these 8 teammates here. And so that's what led me to this story.
I think it's a perfect segue to go right into the story that you sent us, the beautifully presented PowerPoint. And I'm going to figure out a way to put that up on our website where people can watch it in real time instead of downloading the.
Yeah. And so, and if we want to have a discussion about it too, like I said, I'm good with whatever. But the picture here, it's titled the Weslaco 8, and we'll dive into why they were called that, from their hometown. But they were 8 high school football teammates that joined the Marines together during World War II. So this picture here obviously is Texas, and Dennis is from there. So if I say anything wrong, I wasn't born in Texas. So if I make a mistake, let me know. But Weslaco, Texas is located right down at the base there in what they call the Rio Grande Valley of Texas. It was founded in 1919. And by 1940 had a population of nearly 7,000. And a lot of these guys that we're about to talk about here, they didn't grow up there. Well, they grew up there, but they weren't born there. They kind of migrated there from the 1920s after the Depression into that area. It was very heavily agriculture, and especially like citrus, cotton, and cattle were some of the big three. And I can't thank the Weslaco Museum enough. They've really have supported this project, and I've asked thousands. I'm sure you're all involved in the history world. I've asked thousands upon thousands of questions, and they always respond. So I appreciate that. So next slide. And so we'll introduce you to the 8 really quick, and I'll make it short and sweet. But this guy here, Edward Pete Hall, he was not the oldest of the 8, but he was, in terms of school, he was a year ahead of the rest of these guys. So he had graduated the year before, in 1942, and I'm not sure if you guys have a football background, but he was a offensive lineman, and he was a co-captain on the team before. But their team wasn't very good. Their team, they were in a rebuilding season, and they only won 2 games. And one of the teams that they played was Mission, Texas, and the quarterback was Tom Landry.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
And he beat them pretty bad. He was a good player, which we probably know now.
Now, by all accounts, not to interrupt you, but by all accounts, was football at the level, because we all know of West Texas football and the love for football, but back in the 20s and 30s, was it even higher held esteem because of lack of entertainment around, or was it just kind of growing in its fanaticism throughout Texas at that time?
That's what that's what I've come to the conclusion. I mean, I wrote a small little book about my high school football team back in the day, and I was surprised at how well the newspapers covered this. I can tell you right now that if it wasn't for newspapers.com, I wouldn't have found any of this. They have the box scores, the game by game, who scored touchdowns. It was insane. I could not believe it.
Yeah, Don, it was huge back in those days. Yeah, even on my grandpa's ship, I've got letters from Byron Yarbrough and Leo Bedell, the 2 officers, going back and forth about the SEC. Who's better, Auburn, Ohio State, So yeah, it was huge.
Yeah, and when they found out, when Pearl Harbor happened, these guys were at a Texas football game on December 7th, 1941. They did from what I learned, they did an annual trip to Texas Stadium up there, and I believe it was Texas versus Oregon. I'd have to go back through my book there, but they were at the game when they found out that the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. So now
he's the oldest of 7. Did Ryan? Did he have any?
We haven't gotten into Ryan yet. He introduced the first slide. He's getting ready to introduce Ryan now.
Yep, and so Leo Ryan here, he was the oldest of 7 sons. He did have a brother that was still alive during my interview process, and I did receive a letter from him about just, some brief information. He has since passed. Leo was from Oklahoma. Like I said, he was one of the many that migrated south to West Texas. So, yep. We're good there. Of course, the one of the famous ones here, Harlan Black. He was born in Yorktown, Texas, which is in DeWitt County. He moved to the McAllen, Weslaco area when he was an infant. And I'm sure if you've read Flags of Our Fathers, he grew up in a very strict Seventh-day Adventist home. His mother was very serious about the religion there, and he went to Valley Grande Academy up until he was a sophomore, when he was expelled because from all accounts he wouldn't rat out on who vandaled the local outhouse. So he transferred to Weslaco High School as a junior, never played sports before, and he earned honorable mention All Valley as a junior, and made a few key plays in his junior season. So he had a pretty good. It sounds like a natural athlete.
Hey, I wanted to ask you about him.
Yep.
Now Desmond Doss, he was a Seventh-day Adventist, wasn't he?
Yep.
Now, but Harlan Block, he's going on and he's in an you're saying his parents were mom was very.
Yep.
So how is he reconciling being a Marine Corps parachutist?
Yeah, and so from what I've thought about too, I think it was that his buddies all went in together, I think was what I found out. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to really interview many of Harlan's family, and I don't want to go against anything that they may know. But I think a lot of it, if I had to guess, all of his best friends were going in. And so I think that's probably my guess.
So it was more of his mom's religion than his.
Yeah, and I think all the kids were, from what I've understood. I think because he was the third of six, I know for a fact that one of his brothers did graduate from Weslaco and played football, one of his younger brothers, but I think the rest of them all graduated from the Adventist school.
Well, I think we can all kind of take from our own life experiences. You can go to any church and pick 15 people, and all 15 of them will have a different level of their version of religion and how they're going to participate in that religion's guidelines and how seriously.
Yeah, but that's unique though, because that's a cult. We would consider that a cult.
I don't mean to interrupt, but I should say too, I did have, and it's in my files over here too, I did interview like a distant cousin of his, and I believe Harlan's dad was a conscientious objector in the First World War. I believe that he went in because he worked in the medical corps.
Yeah,
so
that checks out because that's what Doss did.
Yep.
Sorry for.
No, that's great. Great discussion. And so next we have Glenn Kleckler, who we'll refer to a lot. He moved to Weslaco as a child as well and grew up on a farm. He was a 3-year varsity player, and I'm sure if you guys know, that's pretty big when it comes to sports. Mostly you're guaranteed 2 years on varsity, but Kleckler was a 3-year player, and he was very well known in school. The school had a local newspaper as well, and he's mentioned in there constantly. I mean, just a well-rounded guy. Great family too. I've been able to interview his family a lot, and they're super people. So.
Now, it may be this photo, but is he one of the few out of the group of that area of Texas that may have a little Hispanic in his family lineage, or is it just this photo gives him that appearance?
I think it's just this photo. His parents were from Alabama.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I mean, it would have made sense with the geographical location of the town and all.
Yep. And then Carl Sims, he was one. He has a pretty unique story too, and he's got an awesome family. His daughter and grandson have helped me with this a lot. Carl had never played sports before, and as you can see, he excelled at the arts. He was very big in choir and band, and in the newspapers, I found out that he had been chosen from the Valley as one of their top artists or whatnot. And forgive me if I'm wrong. I'm not I'm learning the arts through this project. So, but he was very good at that. And the coach Osborne Little looked at him and this guy could be an athlete. And so he joined the team as a senior, and it ended up paying off.
Well, you got to keep in mind too, at the time, and even through the 60s, I mean, every adult in my family now, all my parents, my aunts, my uncles, they were all musicians. And back in this particular time, in the 30s and 40s and even in the 20s, having a skill in orchestra, a brass band, was a potential way to support your family. We didn't have computers to generate music. Radio was a new thing, and so you can get a gig jingles. You could play at the local orchestra. So learning an instrument was a reasonable expectation to at least have a medium level class vocation at the time. And so there was a tremendous amount of people who learned those skills, and sadly, now it's a struggle to keep music departments going in schools these days. But back then it was typing and music. That was, typing music or working with your hands. That's how you're going to possibly find a job outside of farming and coal mining back in those days.
Well, and it's funny you mentioned that because his job in the off season was working for the Rio Grande Valley Radio. So that was his job before going into the service. So, yep, that we're good here. And then we got Leo Leduc. Leo was another one who his family was part of the early settlers in Weslaco, and he was vice president of the class, vice president of the athletic club, voted, I wrote there, most handsomest in his class, very well known as well in his class, and his family too is phenomenal. And I like to give the family shout out because, like I said, I've asked numerous questions and they were so eager to help me, and his family actually supplied a lot of these photos that are throughout here. So,
and this is a great photo. This is one of those photos that just goes to show, and I've said this on some of my podcasts, when it comes to fashion and style, those are the two industries that just rotate every 10, 15 years. And if you would have put this in color, put a HD Instagram filter on it, with it, because that hairstyle, it's starting to die out again, but it came back for a while a couple years ago, and I still have that now because of my living history. But you put a color Instagram filter on this, and this could easily pass as somebody's high school photo from 2 years ago.
Oh, yeah. And then we got Robert Suter here. Robert's family also was great with this, but he was born on December 6, 1924, and I want you to, at the bottom, you'll see his brother, James Frederick Suter, was killed or listed as missing in action on the USS Arizona on December 7th, so the day after his brother's birthday, which I'm sure installed a little bit of drive into him as the war wore on. He was an excellent track athlete as well. He was a mile relay guy, ran the 400. Back then it was the 440. But he was a good athlete as well.
Running a 440 and Chuck Taylor All-Stars. No arch support. Just
I know,
flat
right?
rubber. Go ahead, Dennis.
How did his have you talked to his family at all?
Yep.
How did his parents feel about him going into the Marine Corps? I mean, was there any other kids in the family?
Nope. There was just he was the youngest of two sons, and I'm not sure. I know his dad.
Terrified.
Yeah, his dad died around the time that he went in, I think shortly before. So brother went, then dad went, and then he went, or he joined up. So it was, and his mom, I believe, remarried. So it was quite a process. But he also, one thing that Weslaco had at the time was they were in a cooperative called Texan, and Bob was an employee of that when he was a kid as well.
I saw that his brother was a radio man, third class aboard the Arizona.
Yep. And then this is the youngest of the Weslaco 8, B.R. Guess. He's another 3-year varsity player and just a phenomenal athlete. He was known as Silent Guess. It seems to me like he was somebody that, he just did what he was told. His daughter and son have helped a lot with this project as well. And so this guy here was the stud of the football. They were all good. They were all fantastic athletes, all of these 8 guys. But this guy here, he was all over the newspaper, and we'll chat about that here on the next slide. So the 1942 football season, 6 of the 7 seniors, this is their final year. Harlan Block is in the back row, second from the left, right next to Glenn Kleckler. The only one missing in here is Carl Sims, but they were predicted to have an average season, and they flipped their record around going into the season. But I will mention too, number 81 in the front row.
I was just looking at 81. He's got a stellar pencil mustache.
Yeah, he was a starter. His name was Joe Garza. And I will mention, too, because I probably won't get to it later, but a lot of these guys went into the service after they graduated. And a lot of them followed the Marines because of what the 8 will do. But number 81 actually joined the Air Corps, and he went down in March, I believe, of 1944. He was killed as well. So Joe Garza was his name. but he was a grade below these other fellas. So, but yeah, next slide.
Looking at this entire group and knowing that, 8, probably possibly a few more that, went to different services, but 8 of these cats went on to serve and to fight. Number 85, he definitely looks like he's either came out of the freshman class or like one of the youngest ones. I mean, you look at these, this group, and a lot of them look like, older, younger teens and young adults, but 85 really drives home the point of the age of this group when this photo was taken.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
They probably all went in, don't you think? I mean, they're the prime. They're in the fit of the fittest. And
yeah.
Yep. I can tell you, too, we talked about Leo Ryan and being the oldest of 7 kids. The guy in the back row next to Harlan Black, so it'd be to our left. So he'd be the first from the left in the back row. That is Kenneth Ryan. Kenneth Ryan was Leo's youngest brother. They were about a year apart. His interview is on the National Museum of the Pacific War website.
Wow.
His name is, and he specifically wrote in there that the main reason why he joined the Marines was because of what those 8 guys did.
Wow.
And he was on Iwo Jima as well.
Wow.
He was a part of the Joint Assault Signal Corps. But so here's the starting lineup, and we won't talk too much about this, but just to point out where the 7 of the 8 guys are. The left tackle is Bob Suter. The right guard is Leo Leduc. The right end is Leo Ryan. Quarterback is B.R. Guess. Fullback Harlan Black, and then the 2 halfbacks are Glenn Kleckler and Carl Sims. So 7 started that year.
Wow.
And then this is their results. They went 6-2-1, and they had 7 shutouts. So if, like I said, football, that means their defense went 7 games without allowing a single touchdown.
Wow.
And 2 of those, and the 2 games that they did, they lost. So every other game, whether they tied or they won, they did not allow a single point scored on them. And by the end of the year, this is B.R. Guest running the ball. He scored 17 rushing touchdowns, threw for about 3 or 4, and he earned a spot on the All Valley team as one of the top players in the league.
Wow.
In this picture, and it's kind of hard to tell, but if you can see in the back, I mean, it looks like the crowd is just packed.
Yeah, you can see that.
And this is crowd, sitting and standing on the field, and then maybe a few. It's not like you had a huge rack of bleachers back then, but yeah, it's very filled in.
And it was their armistice game, so that would have been game 8 at Donna when they lost 6-19. That was their, every year and even at our school, they had the local November 11th game. And so this was their game. And they played the local Donna rivals and lost. But they were 6-2-1 and totally flipped that record around because it was the opposite the year before. And so January 1943, and the dates differ. I have done my best on research, and like I said, I've interviewed a lot of the families. 5 of the 8 families have, and their parents really did not talk about what happened during or after the war. So Glenn Kleckler was the one that lived the longest, and I won't get into try and go off the rabbit hole here, but he was interviewed by the National Museum of the Pacific War as well, and he came up with the story that in January 1943 it was about the first war, from what he said, the first warmest day since the winter of 43, and Harlan Black had his truck because Harlan's family were dairy farmers and they hauled oil to local refineries, and Harlan had the idea of, hey guys, let's skip school today and let's go watch a movie. And Glenn Kleckler had been striving to go to the Perfect Attendance Award and ultimately decided to go with his friend. And so him, Carl Sims, and Harlan Black got in the truck and took off. And those 3 guys Ultimately, you'll hear about them three being together here in a little bit, because the story is so weird how it all adds up with dates. And so keep those three guys in the back of your mind. But next slide.
Real quick, Andrew, looking at this school, now you said you went to a very small school in southern Michigan. I went to school in Ohio and Columbus.
Yep.
How old was your school that you went to? Since the town was so small, was it an older school or was it a modern day school?
So it was a newer high school, but our middle school, which used to be the old high school, looks almost identical to this.
Okay, perfect. Because I went to my middle school was called Park Street Elementary School in Grove City, Ohio. But as you just said, it was the aforementioned Park Street High School from back in the day. And so looking at this, my middle school looked a lot like this. We had all the old school heaters, the water-based heaters in the corner. I'm sure that place was riddled with asbestos. You had all the pipes with the asbestos coating. You had all the. So looking at that school, it just reminds me of the middle school I went to. We had all the old skinny lockers and just. It was so old. How old was it? It was so old that it had to stage in the gymnasium. Because remember, back in those days, footprints were more premium, so a lot of times you had to stage in the cafeteria, or the gym also acted as an auditorium, and so you would have a gymnasium with the basketball hoop, and if you missed it, it went right through the curtain into the stage. And so looking at that slide, it just reminds me of the middle school I went to.
Yep. No, it definitely for me too. And so these guys, these three, they skipped school and went to the Weslaco movie theater, and Kleckler had decided, you know what, let's not go here, because the manager of the theater was a big football fan. And back in the day, you get caught skipping school, you know what's going to happen to you. And so they traversed all the way through the valley, and they ended up at Harlingen, where they saw, and I've looked for movies that were playing, and the one that I think that if they did do this, because like I said, there's been debates on what happened. There was talk about, boys being boys, doing their thing back in the day, and need I say more? And so I'm sure it was a mixture of both, but if it was on this date that they went, it was Somewhere I Will Find You, and it was a Clark Gable film, because Kleckler did mention in his interview that they didn't really want to watch this movie that they were going to see. But ultimately the movie ends and they're like, now what do we do? How do we explain this? Because ultimately our principal is going to find out. And they saw the Marine Corps recruiting sign. The other story that I heard was there was issues going on maybe with the football coach and the boys doing their thing, and they were near an army. They were going to go join the army, and the Marine recruiter said, you're not tough enough to join the Marines, and so that's what got them. But I haven't found any research on, other than chatting with families. So I'm sure it was a mixture of both. But Kleckler's interview, explains what they say. So that's the fun part of research. You kind of have to pick the middle ground and see what happens, because a lot of these guys died before they could tell their story. So they get back to school, and the next day, and the principal calls them in and says, all right, boys, I know where you were. Let's get this over with. And Kleckler, before they left the Marine recruiter, because the Marine recruiter told him, hey, I can't sign you up until you graduate. And so Kleckler says, you know what, let's sign our paperwork. And then when the principal calls us in tomorrow, we're going to say that was our sole purpose. And so he convinced the principal that that's why they skipped school. And so about 3 days later, the principal says, hey, his name was Claiborne Norris, and he says, hey, Glenn, I got you approved of early graduation. And whether the boys wanted that or not, they were approved of that. And so within 7 days, this appeared in the local newspaper. The three guys are kind of in the front row there, Carl Sims, Glenn Kleckler, and Harlan Block. And they were joined by 4 classmates and 1 upperclassman. And they were, some of the newspapers said the entire backfield and right side of the Panther line have enlisted in the Marines. And then I've seen a few that have said the Panthers are now going to fight a different or play a different game, and it's against the Axis powers in the war. So they were getting highly regarded, and for a week straight, they were headlines.
Now, if you're writing a Hollywood screenplay version of this, you got to go with the story about the excuse that they lost control of, like, we went to join the Marines, and now all of a sudden they got early dismissal, and you would put the shot up on the screen, and the gentleman in the back behind Harlan Block, he's the one that's really upset that this excuse got out of hand. You can just look at his face.
And he's the one that lost the brother. And so it was, I'm sure, I can guarantee you they were all kind of wondering what did we get into, but, they were there were local events planned for them. They had church services for them where they were the guests of honor. They were prepped to go. So.
Yeah, and so the caption on this beautifully preserved newspaper from January 21st, 1943, above the 8 boys that are leaving Thursday on January 28th for the Marines, reading from left to right row, Leo Ryan, B.R. Gass, Pete Hall, and Robert Suter, front row, Carl Sims, Leo LeDuc, Glenn Kleckler, and Harlan Block. Graduation exercise for these boys will be held Monday, January 25th. On January 28th, this group will leave for San Antonio, where they will have their final physical examination. From there, they will go into San Diego, California for their induction into the United States Marine Corps.
Yep. And so back to the mothers. So this is the 8 moms. And they were heavily publicized as well because their 8 sons were going. Harlan Block's mom is second from the right in the back row.
And
that was them.
She's the one that we remember from Flags of Our Father, where she says, "That's my Harlan. I can recognize his bum anywhere."
Yep.
What's the can you go back to that picture again? Who is the mom of the young man whose brother was killed on the Arizona?
The back left, far left. Second from the right in the first row. Second from the right in the first, or second from the left in the first row. I apologize. Right in. Yep.
Either way, she's more jovial than you would think she would be in this, knowing that her son's going off after her husband passed away and her other son died.
Yep, second from the left. I had to remember because Kleckler's mom is the next one over, and then LeDuc's mom is on the far right. Yep. And then this picture here, sorry, it's a little blurry, but this was the 7 seniors on their graduation day. And it's, like I said, the Weslaco Museum preserved a lot of the information, and the ceremony was, I have the whole list of the ceremony that began about 3 p.m. in the auditorium. They had the early graduation. So, and this was the first time recorded in Weslaco history, because like we talked about before, a bunch of these, families had gone to war. A former principal had went to the war already. People were going, but this was the first time that a number left at one time. And that left school early. This was the first time in Weslaco history.
Well, and they were already making headlines and winning all these games.
Yep.
And they were hometown names already.
Yep. And, like I said, in the Weslaco, because there's the newspapers and then there was the student paper. And, they were all over the place. They just class act boys that – I can think of my friends from high school, and I can think of who represented who. And it just makes you think about what I don't know if we'll talk about a different war here for a second, but like the beginning of the movie Born on the 4th of July, when Ron Kovic and all of his buddies are playing Army, and then they go in, we have to get in there before it gets over. I can't say that that's what these guys were thinking, but it reminds me a lot of that attitude.
No, I don't know if you mentioned it before. We talked about how small your class was, and we're talking about how the 7 here in this photo plus the 8th gentleman. How large was their graduation class altogether before they got separated for early graduation?
Yeah, I think it was about 70. Leo LeDuc on the left there next to Harlan Black. His son sent me because the Weslaco High School has all the yearbooks that they've preserved and they share them online, but there was no yearbook for this class because there was a paper shortage. Well, his son had the copy of the only copy, like not the only copy, but one of a few that had been printed, and so I was able to see that.
Wow.
And yeah, that's where all the pictures of the guys at the beginning of the presentation came from.
And so so that I understand, they didn't have an early graduation for the entire class. They had two graduations, one for these guys and then one for the rest of the class on the regular day in June?
Yep.
Wow.
Yep, and these seven, I mean, like they played the Marine Corps hymn, and so to top this off, what happened was according to Glenn Kleckler again, they gave presentations or whatever and hand them the diplomas, and then they wanted one of the seven to make a speech, and Glenn Kleckler was, the big guy in the class. He was the president of. He was known as the best all around in his senior class. He was the president of the Weslaco varsity club. So he was well rounded, and even in his later life, just a very well known guy, well respected. And so he went up and in his interview, he said, I said, the student body, wherever we go, whatever we may be doing, we will never forget this day. And as we move through the presentation, just remember the day that this happened. So January 25th, keep that in your back pocket as we get closer to the end here.
As you're going through the story, I'm stuck in that screenplay mode, right? And we've all heard the story of the big fish in a little pond going to become the little fish in a big pond.
Yep.
Once again, in the screenplay version of this, the opening scene, obviously you got to speed through part of this, but you want to build your character development. Just think like Varsity Blues style montages of these guys driving around town in their late 30s cars, getting all the girls going on celebration. Now they're having this party, this graduation just for them. They're going to the soda shop. Everybody's patting them on the back. Woohoo! And then in the next cut, they're standing in a Marine Corps boot camp getting screamed at in the face because now they're a bunch of nobodies. And the end of both spectrums on that, it would just completely you just see them just, holy hell, what did I get into?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And so now we get to the picture that is behind Dennis there. You'll notice in here there's 13 guys now. And so 5 of these guys are from opposing schools. And I have interviewed the families of those guys as well, just to see, if they had any stories and whatnot. And from what it sounds like, they were just opposing rivals, and they saw the attention that these 8 guys were getting, and they're like, all right, this is it, boys. We're not going to let all these Weslaco boys get all the credit. And so they joined as well. And this is their induction ceremony on the Bedell building in San Antonio, Texas. They graduate on January 25th, but were not called up until February. And they made the trip up by train or by bus. Excuse me. They went by bus to San Antonio and were inducted. And then after this, they went by Pullman train to the Marine Recruit Depot in San Diego, California.
And if any of you are wondering about the quality of their pomade and how well it holds, just look at the tie and the 5th guy from the end. It's a windy day there. His tie is on the move, but their hair, it's holding firm.
Yep. This is platoon 154 that they were in. I know we can pinpoint a few of them. Harlan Black, the second from the top row, he's third from the left. I was able to find 7 of these guys in here. Again, Carl Sims is not in this picture, but they went through boot camp. It was the 7-week process. Carl Sims actually scored the highest in the rifle range with 307. But just a quick story about the rifle range that Glenn Kleckler talked about was they used football when they talked about when they went to the rifle range. They said, how many of you guys are football players? And Kleckler said, obviously those 8 guys rose their hands. And he's like, well, I want you just to think that you're not trying to tackle these guys now. They're trying to get you. And so he made this because he was their drill instructor was a Guadalcanal veteran. And so he had just explained to him, hey, you guys cannot be scared. You cannot be scared. You guys weren't scared in football. Now you can't be scared now. So that they brought football into the mix again when they're at boot camp. But and he was asked too, he's like, was boot camp, the interviewer there for the National Museum of the Pacific War said, now, Glenn Kleckler, were you out of shape? And he said, I can't remember any of us being out of shape because we were all athletes, and they were all multi-sport athletes as well. I mean, and one thing that I was able to do was I don't know if you've ever heard of Golden Arrow Military Research, but I was able to purchase all of the Weslaco 8's United States Marine Corps service records. And so they had filled out the questionnaire and stuff in there and talked about what they did. And a lot of these guys were 3-4 sport athlete guys and farm kids. So we know about that.
It strikes me as interesting, the things that stand out to people when we look at photos like this. And I don't know if it's the color change between the uniforms and their M1, I guess back then it was a 1903 Springfield belt, but their cartridge belt. The person who photographed this did such a great job of arranging them by height, and how you can tell that is all of their cartridge belts are almost level across the board. You can see a little variations in a few of them, but because the standard of where they wore them and how tall they were, you can almost see a perfectly horizontal line of their cartridge belts as they're standing for this photograph. Carrying a firearm daily comes with serious responsibilities. Responsibilities your everyday counterparts may not have to consider. Knowing where you can and cannot legally bring your firearm is crucial. But sometimes, life takes you places where carrying isn't an option. That's where the StopBox Pro portable gun safe comes in. Securely store your firearm in your vehicle while handling life's obligations. Safety, responsibility, and with peace of mind. StopBox Pro. Protection when you need it. Security when you don't. For more information, visit stopboxusa.com/D410.
Hey, a little side note, Andrew and Don. The Bedell building, I had never heard of that, and I just researched it while you were talking. And that building, I'm looking at a picture from the 1940s, and I can see that flagpole. The one, that flagpole right there. In this picture, it's from the street. It's on Broadway in Houston Street. Like, I've traveled that road so many times.
So are they on the roof?
Yeah, they're on the roof.
So that's a concrete header down there, because at first it looked like a piece of industrial equipment, but now you're saying that I can tell they're on the roof, the street's behind them, and so that would be like an ornamental concrete fixture.
And that, you can see that in this picture here of the Bedell building. Little side note, we need to get you down here, Andrew, so you can go to these sites and take you down to Weslaco. You got a place to stay. Anyway, I'll let you take over again.
Yeah. No, that'd be great. Like I said, I want to get down there again, because I was only down there for about 6 hours between Weslaco and Harlingen that one day. So got to make time to go down there. But this is obviously a map of the Pacific Theater of World War II. And after boot camp, they were promised that they were going to stay together, and that lasted about an hour. After they graduated boot camp, they were all split up into different units. And so we can go to the next slide, and just a small little introduction on what each of them did. But Glenn Kleckler, we'll talk more about here in a little bit, but he went into the 90 millimeter anti-aircraft group. And he was one of the first guys to go overseas. And he was in the Marshall Islands for a while, and then he got reassigned to the 4th Marine Division. And we'll come back to him on Iwo Jima here in a little bit. Leo Ryan, he went, they were on the same troop ship together. He went to Johnston Island down in Hawaii. a part of the 16th Defense Battalion, and his job was he was a searchlight operator, and he was in charge of about 40 men. And I'm still doing research on his unit right now. But he got exposed to about 800 million candle power of light during a training exercise or a searchlight mission. And so he was temporarily blinded for a little bit. But he was, little side note, he got married to his high school sweetheart shortly before he shipped out. But yeah, Leo was, not to my knowledge, wasn't in combat, but, obviously was around there. And then after the war, he went back to Bremerton, Washington, where he closed out the end of the war. And he was the first discharged of the guys. He was discharged on July 7th, 1945.
It looks like he may have gotten to a little howdy-do before this photo was taken. It looks like the bridge of his nose is cut like you would see when someone's nose gets broken.
Yeah. Pete Hall. So Pete Hall was put into the 2nd Marine Division. He served on Tarawa, Saipan, Tinian, and Okinawa. And I've been doing some of the Tarawa research right now for my book. And like I said, I've made one thing that I've done is in the last year or so, the research never stops. And if I continue to research, the book will never get written. But I kind of want to talk about each, pick a different engagement for each of the guys. So I'm covering all of them. But he was with... he was assigned to the 10th Marine Regiment, but they were attached to the 6th Marine Regiment at Tarawa, and he came in the reserves towards the end of the battle and kind of was involved in the mopping up duties. But he was with the pack howitzers, is what he did. I know for sure 105 millimeter he was with on Tarawa, and then he got transferred into a different battery from Saipan to Okinawa. And then he was discharged at the end of the war. And then we got B.R. Guest. So his daughter generously sent me a picture of his Purple Heart. He was with an engineer company, F Company of the 2nd Battalion of the 18th Marine Regiment. And Don, I believe you had Clay Bonnyman Evans on before. B.R. Guest was in Bonnyman's unit. And I don't have this letter on here, but what happened was after I gave this presentation to the Weslaco Museum a few months ago on Zoom, his daughter listened in, and he wrote. He was interviewed too, and they were, but he wrote in the margins of Robert Sherrod's book on Tarawa about his experience, and he talks about Bonnyman in there, and I have. Evans's book, Bones of My Grandfather, right here, because I want to learn, a little bit more about what they did. But Guess was supposed to go in on the first wave because they were attached to the 8th Marines, 2nd Battalion, 8th Marines. And he didn't go in till later, and he wasn't even on Tarawa, I'm guessing an hour. He got hit by a grenade just below the knee and was on a hospital ship for about 2 months and was awarded the Purple Heart on December 7th of 43. And then he fought the rest of the war. I mean, he was on Saipan, Tinian, and Okinawa, just like Pete Hall.
Wow.
So, yep. And then Harlan Block, he kind of went into something a little different as well. He went into the Marine Parachute Unit, which, as we know, the Marine Raiders and the Marine Paramarines were the elite of the Marines at the time. And he went to Bougainville in December of 43. He was attached to H&S Company and served about a month there. And then when he returned back to the States, he was transferred to E Company of the 28th Marine Regiment of the new 5th Division. And as we know, the 5th Division was comprised of new recruits, but mostly the Raiders and the Paramarines, because they knew that they needed to put the elite together as they were getting ready to go towards Japan. And then he was promoted to corporal in October of 44.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but part of the reason the Paramarines and the Raiders kind of didn't have a long shelf life, not much need for parachuting into the Pacific, but the Raiders, on the other hand, was a different story. But there were some higher ups in the Marine Corps who kind of felt, hey, why have these different skill sets in the Marines? Because as far as I'm concerned, all Marines have these different skill sets. That's what separates us from the Army, the Navy, and the Air Corps, etc. And so internally there was certain people who had a hard time allocating resources and specific training for these groups when they felt that all Marines should be able to handle that level of skill set.
Right, and there was talk that the Marines were going to be disbanded anyway. I did read that there was talk that they were going to get rid of them in general, by the end of the war. So,
I went to school for computers in 2002, and one of the gentlemen in my MCP class, he actually taught computer programming and stuff in the Marine Corps, but he was getting ready to leave the Corps, and he needed to get civilian certificates because his Marine Corps stuff meant nothing in the private sector. And that was in 2001. And that is when I learned, and I was kind of in shock because the Marine Corps always had a thing for me because growing up, my best friend, Danny Eaton's dad, was a gunny sergeant in the Marine Corps. So from second grade to sixth grade, in the summertime, I basically lived at his house, and his mom was, in the Navy. And so the Marine Corps always and I lived on Rickenbacker Air Force Base, always went to the air shows. But anyhow, so I always had a special place in my heart, but it wasn't until I went to school for computers and I was talking to this gentleman, that's when I found out that the Marine Corps is the least funded military branch out of all of our branches. And that was shocking to me. Well, I guess it kind of makes sense because technically they're part of the Navy, but in and of itself, it's like all the stuff they do, all the, the promotion, the talk, and then find out that they get this won't mean much to people who aren't super computer nerds, but at that time, Windows XP was the rage, and Windows XP was it. And at that time, the Marine Corps had just moved into Windows 2000. So their computer system in 2002, they were just upgrading to a system that Microsoft put out in 1999 that they wrote in 1998. And Windows XP was already out, and they had actually already skipped over Millennium and went to XP. And so that's how far behind they were at that point.
Yes. And this is Carl Sims. He was attached to the 3rd Amphibian Tractor Battalion, and I wish I would have done better with the picture, but his daughter sent me the picture of that it's an amphibious tractor blown up. He was on Guam. And he was one thing, and I want to correct too. I spoke for World War II TV, and I mentioned he was with the 3rd Marine Division on Iwo Jima. He was assigned to the 5th, but on Guam, he was on the 3rd. He was with the 3rd Marine Division. And he's got a fantastic story too, because when they were writing home, they weren't allowed to say where they were. And he had a code with his family of where he was at. So based off of, here's where the A is or here's where the U is, I'm in Australia right now. So he was, keeping in touch with his family, but he was a radio operator, field telephone man, and he served on Guam. He was on there for about a month and then prepped to go to Iwo Jima here in a little bit.
This episode is brought to you by our friends over at Fume. Fume cartridges are crafted from medical-grade polyester designed for use with essential oils. Fume, a non-vape, non-nicotine, non-tobacco device, works by replacing the hand-to-mouth fixation, calming nervous tension through fidgeting, and distracts you from the bad habits with delicious flavors. Psychologists have shown stopping a bad habit cold turkey is very hard for your brain. The Fume handheld device is a built-in fidget, also has a weight similar to most vape pens. If you're interested in replacing old bad habits with new good habits, head on over to tryfume.com/D410M and get yourself a free pack of toppers with your purchase. The toppers is a perfect new accessory designed with your comfort in mind. Slip it onto the mouthpiece for a softer, warmer feel. So replace those old habits with a new habit, a good habit. Simply go to tryfume.com/D410M. That's tryfume.com/D410M.
What's wild is these are boot camp pictures, aren't they?
Yeah, that's their service pictures. Yep.
What's wild is I was just, as you were talking, I was glancing back at their picture that was taken of them in high school not a year before, and they look like killers. Legit killers.
Yeah.
2000, at the end of the War on Terror, roughly around that time, there was a photographer. He got, 8, 9 guys at boot camp got pictures of them the day before boot camp, and then got pictures of them after their service ended. Some of them it was a year later because of injury. Some it was 2. Some of it was 4. And just like the guys who just, served just a year then got out, the side-by-side photos, it looked like 10 years difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, that's really something.
Yeah, and Robert Suter here, he kind of had a different unit too. So he was in the 2nd Joint Assault Signal Company, and they were used to call in airstrikes and during the invasions. And so Robert Suter went in. They were attached to the 2nd Marine Division, and he landed on Saipan. And he was wounded on D-Day at Saipan, June 15, 1944, by a shot in the collarbone. And it did say he went in on Tinian and Okinawa as well, but still looking at more info on that for what he did. But the service record states he was in all 3 engagements. And then finally, we have Leo Leduc. Leo Leduc was an airplane mechanic. He went to the Great Lakes Naval Station in Chicago after boot camp, and then he served in the Marshall Islands for the duration of his time in the war. About what you see on the dates was about where he was, and he didn't see combat, but he saw the planes coming in and out of the invasions. And this is a picture of Leduc and Glenn Kleckler in the Marshall Islands. So they're seeing each other all over the place. And that leads us into the next topic here as we get into. So as we know, the training for Island X, or Iwo Jima as we know now, was very heavy. And we knew that we were going to send in 3 Marine divisions to go into the fight. And so they were training in and around Hawaii. After Harlan Black returned, he went to Camp Pendleton and then went to Camp Tarawa at the Parker Ranch in Hawaii. And during this time, he had been home, and from Flags of Our Fathers and other articles I've read, he was telling pretty much everybody that he knew that, hey guys, I'm not coming back. I'm done. This is it. And I don't know if you can say this with everybody, and I won't get too far down the trail here, but we had a local kid who our football team's named after, who was killed in Vietnam. And everybody that I've talked to said it was kind of a similar situation. He knew before, because I was able to meet one of his hooch mates from the war, and he told me, he said, so-and-so was a good guy, and just a fun-loving guy, but when he knew it was up, he was gone in a week. It was just, he knew it was coming. And Harlan Black, it sounds like it was this way. And I don't know if it was before or around this time, but like I said, I made a calendar of all of what these guys did, when they could have interacted with each other. And I don't know if maybe it was before they went in, but he told all 8 or 7 of his friends that if I die, I would like you to name your first son after me. And Leo Leduc, his son is named Don Harlan Leduc. Wow. And it's named after Harlan Black. So where we go here is, so all these troop ships, they're in Hawaii, they're getting ready to, if you want to go back really quick, Don, they're in Hawaii, they're training, and it was around February, it was in the middle of January, where all these Marines are walking in Honolulu, and Harlan Black runs into his best friend, Glenn Kleckler, and they talk about Harlan's furlough, because out of all the guys, Harlan Black is the only one that got to go home during the war. The rest of them were all, like BR Guess and them, they were in for the long haul. And so, they're talking about home. And so Harlan Black says to Glenn Kleckler, he hands him this Marine Corps ring that he received from, I believe, Camp Elliott or Camp Pendleton at the PX there. And he said, I want you to give this ring to my mother. And this ring is preserved now at the Iwo Jima Museum in Harlingen, Texas. And Glenn Kleckler didn't believe him. He's like, this is my happy-go-lucky friend. He's telling me he's going to get killed. Go jump in a lake. But he took the ring, and kept with it, just, with the intuition that, yep, I'm going to see my friend again. And there was an article in the Weslaco student newspaper that before Iwo Jima, Be Our Guest, Pete Hall, Bob Suter, I think Carl Sims, they all saw each other on Saipan before, because all these guys went to Saipan. The second division was on Saipan in R&R, and then the guys going to Iwo Jima were on Saipan. And so stopped at Saipan. So they had a reunion. I don't know if Harlan was involved with it, because one of the other players that was on their football team was in the 5th division as well, and they stayed in touch. They were together, but at least 4 of them were together at one time before this. But yeah, so we're ready for the next one. And so this map here, I don't know if you follow the YouTube page Project Past. They do James does Civil War history and whatnot. Great history YouTube channel. He made these maps for me. This is the invasion of Iwo Jima, and Harlan Block is with the 5th Division on the left. They landed on Green Beach, and Carl Sims was with the 3rd Amphibian Tractor Battalion that landed on Green Beach with Harlan Block. Not sure if they were in the same wave or whatnot, but they landed on the same one. And then on Blue Beach 1, Glenn Kleckler went in. So the 3 guys that skipped school are now landing on Iwo Jima. So almost 2 years later, after they were inducted.
Wow.
And so, yeah, that's my animation there. So as we know, the 28th Marine Regiment, the 1st Battalion of the 28th Marine Regiment, their job was to cut off Suribachi cut off the island at the head of Mount Suribachi, the 500-foot extinct volcano there at the point. Harlan was in the 2nd Battalion, so they brought up the rear. But by February 21st, they attacked the mountain, and they took it in 4 days. And so most of the casualties from their unit happened on February 21st when they went towards Suribachi, which I can totally understand. And you got to give General Kurabayashi credit, because, I mean, that island was defended to the absolute T, underground, in the cave, in the mountain, all over the place. And most of the time you couldn't see anybody. And so they were going... They were fighting an enemy unseen, but they did what they had to do. Yep, we're good there. And there, yep. So there's the 20th through the 21st. They went and hit the point. And so by February 22nd, they're like, okay, if there is no action, we are going up tomorrow morning, which is the 23rd, and we're going to secure the mountain. And that's where the famous, the famous event happened, which some people think maybe that's when the war ended. Unfortunately, it wasn't. But so that's the first flag raising picture. And throughout my research, the guys that were involved with the identifications, Stephen Foley and Brent Westenmeyer, I've gotten to become really good friends with them. So the story, we won't dive into all of the identifications and stuff, but from Harlan's point of view, we can chat about that. So a 4-man patrol, there was a patrol before that went up and didn't get even a third of the way up the hill, and then a patrol of 4 men from F Company made it almost to the top. And then 3rd platoon of Easy Company, 40-man patrol, walked up, and that's the one that Doc Bradley, whose son wrote the book, he was a part of, and they put this flag up. There was some Japanese resistance, but the flag went up, and then the island cheered, and boats were honking their horns, and it was just an exciting time because it was the first time that a flag had went up on Japanese homeland. And the U.S. Secretary of the Navy, James Forrestal, wanted that flag. And so Colonel Chandler Johnson of the 2nd Battalion was like, they're not going to have this flag, so let's put up a larger flag. And so through my research and interviews with the historians there, and there's a letter that is in later in the presentation from Ira Hayes Colonel Johnson and Captain Dave Severance suggested that a patrol go up and put a larger flag up, and it was assigned to Sergeant Mike Strank and 3 of his 2nd Platoon fire team members, and that consisted of Corporal Harlan Black and then Privates First Classes Ira Hayes and Franklin Southsea. And so they knew about halfway up the mountain that they were going to put that flag up. And so, next slide.
If you guys go back to WTSP World War II episode 24, when I interviewed Mr. Robert Glenn of Fox Company 2nd Battalion 3rd Marine, he had actually was laying on a gurney waiting for medical assistance from frag he took from a grenade when that flag was raised, and he was talking about how everybody was reacting to seeing the flag raising.
Yep. And so this is the famous photo here. And these pictures were submitted by the 2 guys that I mentioned, Stephen Foley and Brent Westemeyer. They fantastic guys, excellent on this history and know a lot more than I do. And the flag went up 1/400th of a second, and the rest was history.
Can you tell our viewers and those that are looking which one is Harlan Block?
Yep, he is at the far end of the pole, and I do have a slide in there when we talk about when he got identified. Yep. And so these pictures here, I wish I would have zoomed in a little more, but so these pictures were taken after the fact. The 2 on the right are the gung-ho photos. One was taken by Rosenthal, and the other one was George Burns. And then Rosenthal took the one on the left, and if you zoom in, that's Harlan Black, Franklin Southsea, and Ira Hayes, and that was one of the pictures that recently came out into the woodwork. And then the one in the middle is the gung-ho photo. And I always noticed that the guy with the cap on, there was always like a tuft of hair sticking out. I remember as a little kid, like I didn't think too much of it, but I'm like, there's got to be somebody standing in behind there. I don't know who the heck that is. Well, come to find out, that's Harlan Black. And if you go to the one on the right, taken from a different angle with the helmet on, you can see his facial features. The slide doesn't, on my end, I didn't do it justice when I uploaded it, but just wanted to kind of show the different Snapchat.
He takes his helmet off and he's waving it in the air.
Yep. Now, and if you watch the film, because it was filmed, you can see. I mean, you can see his face in there. So, and I want, and we don't have to go into too much of the identification, but the guy that they originally thought was in Harlan Black's spot, Sergeant Henry Hansen, he's the guy standing in front of Harlan, and you can tell he's kind of got a different attire on. He's got, his pants are rolled up. He's got the shells on his shoulder there, and he's got a cap on, so he's kind of looks a little different than what Harlan Black looks like in the Rosenthal photo. Real quick,
just to point out to our audience, the gung-ho photo inadvertently caused what we would call nowadays misinformation. Rosenthal said, yeah, that picture, I staged that we set that up afterwards. And then, as we do nowadays, people heard that and thought that the flag raising photo was staged, and it took so many years for them to try to set the. No, the flag raising wasn't staged. The gung-ho photo was staged. That was done afterwards. Clearly, you're not watch your interval, boys. Get together. No. During combat, you spread out, but by him saying in an interview that it was set up, so many people thought he was saying that the flag raising photo was set up.
Right, and Rosenthal thought he didn't even get the right picture when he took the one of the flag going up, because he's like, I didn't even think to ask for their names or anything, So, yeah, no, you're 100% right there, Don.
And when this episode airs on the website, I will include at the bottom the YouTube video I did on our Iwo Jima flag raising statue here in Cape Coral, because it is made from the project mold that the Italian sculptor made in between his concept art and the end piece. So technically our statue here in Cape Coral is made from one of the 3 original molds of the Iwo Jima flag raising statue.
Nice. So here's another map here, and I'll mention too, so after the flag raising, Harlan's unit kind of stayed around Mount Suribachi, cleanup duties and whatnot. But as we know that the battle was getting worse on the northern end of the island, and so the 28th Marines and the rest of the 5th Marine Division was to go attack the north end of the island. And so their jump-off date was March 1st, 1945. And to the left is the letter. And like I said, my main thing with the story was I wanted to get, the personal stories and whatnot of these guys and use their letters to tell the story. But this letter here was in Harlan Block's United States Marine Corps service record. And it's dated on Iwo Jima, March 1, 1945. And it was a letter to his mother. And if you read through it, it says that he saw it. So it says, "Dearest mother, just a few lines to let you know I'm okay. I came through without a scratch. Oh, yes, I saw Sims, Carl, just before we hit. He is okay. I guess you're pretty anxious to hear from me by this time. This isn't much, but it's all I could get. I will write more later. Your son, Harlan." So he had seen Carl Sims between the battle and whatnot, and I'm guessing this is the only time he wrote home, but the date says it all. So they jumped off about 9 o'clock in the morning. And in that time, Sergeant Michael Strank, that was Harlan's squad leader, fellow flag raiser, the man he idolized by all accounts, was killed by what they believe was friendly naval fire. And this is where, in my book, I'm going to kind of explain a little bit of everything, because Harlan Block is killed in action on March 1, 1945, the day that this letter was written. Accounts vary. Flags Our Fathers says that he survives later into the afternoon and gets killed by a mortar blast and screams, "They killed me." There was a documentary that came out in 2000 that they interviewed veterans that served with him and said that he had been cartwheeled by a mortar shell. And that was by a veteran that said that. And then there was another thought that maybe he had been killed in the same strike as Mike Strank, because, he would have had to have been right next to him, when that happened. So potentially friendly fire. But in this service record, we'll talk about the letter here. Harlan Block's mother receives this letter before she receives the telegram. And so the reason why this letter is in the service record is because she sent it to the Marine Corps debating her son's death because she didn't believe it. And so the Marines had 2 fellow Marines sign affidavits 2 months to the day after he was killed, so May 1st, 1945. And they state that they were attacking in the area of Nishi Ridge there on the map, and he had been hit by mortar fire, enemy artillery fire, and died while receiving first aid from a hospital apprentice named Gill, who I found, I believe, was Ralph Gillespie. So in my book, I'm going to probably discuss all of the options, but I'm going to probably go with the affidavits, as they were written 2 months after by 2 guys that were there. And like I said, in the fog of war, who the heck knows? But, and we may never know. But it was definitely artillery fire of some sort, whether it was from a naval ship with Mike Strank, or it was, surviving later in the day and getting killed. Regardless, unfortunately, he passed away. And that letter was received by his mother shortly before they received the telegram. And that's his grave on Iwo Jima, I did find out it was taken by Bob Suter, so another member of the Weslaco 8. He must have been on Iwo Jima for something. And on his, tracking on his service record, I can't find the dates, but the Weslaco Museum sent me the picture, and Suter is credited with taking that picture. So he was there to see his friend.
Wow.
And so after the war, they kind of all did their own thing. Glenn Kleckler came home to Corpus Christi and then was discharged in November. Be our guest there in the middle. He, like I said, he survived his wounds and was discharged in January Leo Leduc was discharged in December, and then Carl Sims on the right was discharged in November as well. Pete Hall and Leo Ryan and Bob Suter, I don't have pictures of them in uniform, but they too all were discharged following the war. And a lot of them went into education. They went to college. They used the GI Bill. Glenn Kleckler and B.R. Guess actually played college football for San Marco College. And I believe Carl Sims on the right did as well for a short time. But yeah, Kleckler, Guess, and Bob Suter all went into education after the war. And then Leo Leduc and Leo Ryan went back into the Marines for a short time.
Wow.
And then, so as we've discussed, the famous picture, I mean, it's all over the newspapers. By the end of Iwo Jima, 3 of the guys were killed, Strank, Block, and Franklin Sousley 20 days later. And even Henry Hansen, who they thought was Harlan Black, he was killed on the same day as Strank and Block as well. So there was talk on who was in the picture, and apparently when Harlan's mother saw it, she was already devastated that they'd received the telegram on March 26th, I believe, and they were devastated that their son had been killed. And she saw this picture and said, "That is my son. I've changed his diaper so many times,"
Wow.
And everybody's like, "There's no way. There's no way possible. The names are right here." And we'll next slide. And so Ira Hayes, who was in Harlan's fire team and a fellow flag raiser, actually wrote Bell Block this letter. It's about a 4-page letter, and it says right in there, Harlan was in on this picture, but how they followed up the picture, I don't know. And so, like in Flags Our Fathers, when you see him say, Harlan was in the picture, that is 100% true. And he did, I'm trying to find the dates, but he did walk to Texas to let Harlan's family know that Harlan was in that picture. And so by January 1947, Hank Hansen was removed and Harlan Block was added into the picture. And that's the way it stood for the next few years. And that is the updated, that was 1947. You got Harlan Block, Renee Gagnon, John Bradley, Michael Strank, Franklin Sousley, and Ira Hayes.
To the casual observer at home, hearing the mother say, "I recognize my son's butt from a photograph," it seems far-fetched. It seems a little crazy. In the end, it's true. In the book of Band of Brothers and in the series, when they interview the veterans, they often talk. They worked with their fellow paratroopers so long and trained them so hard that they could tell who was who in the middle of the night by their silhouette.
Yep.
I experienced this in real life. I was never in the service, but I've been reenacting for 11 years now with one of the gentlemen who just recently retired, and he's the one I have his Ranger helmet. His name's Art Dersheimer, and I've been reenacting with Art, and we've been in the woods and in uniform, and these guys I never see in their civilians. It's so weird when you're at a reenactment and someone's leaving and they're wearing their everyday clothes. You're like, never pictured you for a polo shirt tucked in the khakis kind of guy, but here we are. I was watching a video. Someone else shot at an event I wasn't at, and they had GoPro footage from behind, and I just see a guy walking in front. I said, "That's Art Dersheimer." And then 2 seconds later, the camera pans and all the way around front, and I was dead on right. You couldn't tell. He'd had a different helmet on, had his M1 jacket on, but I could just tell by the way he walks and his shape, I knew who it was just from marching behind him for 10 years. And so it's obviously it turned out right, but yeah, so it's not far-fetched that someone could identify a family member or someone they served with simply by looking at them from behind and just seeing their stance, because I've experienced it in real life.
Yeah, for sure. And so now when I talked to you before about remembering the date, so January 25th of 1943, they graduated from high school. January 23rd of 1949, 6 years later, they bring their brother home. And I do have Harlan's deceased personnel file, and the Black family wanted him to come home, and so they finally were able to send him home in January of 49. And these were pictures of his funeral. 2,000 people attended it, and then there was about 3,000 that watched the ceremony. But the 7 guys that were there when he joined with them were his pallbearers. And if you can see the picture on the left, there's 8 guys, but the 7 out in front, the 3 on each side and the 1 in front, are all members of the 8. And then, but yeah, they brought him home, and he had a full military honors cemetery, and he was buried in Weslaco, at the Weslaco Cemetery. And then in February of 1995, for the 50th anniversary, he was reburied in Harlingen at the Marine Military Academy, where he rests today, and there's a picture of that later. But here's a picture of a reunion later in life. You've got B.R. Guess, Glenn Kleckler, Leo Ryan, and Bob Suter. They all did their own thing following the war. Short little synopsis of each. Carl Sims joined a barbershop quartet. He was a part of the Border Patrol. And there might be a picture on the next slide of them. No, so I guess it's not. Then I had to change a few things when I was uploading it. But Carl Sims, never. It sounds to like from his daughter, he never had a problem talking about the war. But he died in 1986 from causes that from malaria, from being in the Pacific. And so, but he was a Border Patrolman, very involved with the law, and passed away in 86. Bob Suter here on the right was next. He got in, like I said, he got into education. He taught all over the Western United States, finally ending up in Vallejo, California. Joined the local fire team there. And he, from what his stepson told me, everybody liked him as a teacher. He passed away in August of 1993, and he's buried in California. Leo LeDuc, he, like I said, he served in the Marines for since the war, another 15 years. He was discharged in 59. He was an airplane mechanic, like I mentioned, and he also was a pilot as well. And he served there was a Texas representative named Wesley West, who worked underneath of him for a while. So he was very involved. And he returned back to his roots in Texas, where he died in 1994. And then Pete Hall died in 1999, June 16th of 1999. And he's buried at Fort Sam Houston. And then B.R. Guess, who's here on the left, after college football, he became a science teacher, raised 3 kids, and died in November of 2001. And then Leo Ryan in the middle, he became a postmaster, referee, stayed in the Weslaco area, and I have not been able to find when he died, but he died here in the last 20 years. And then we'll hop onto the next slide. So that's Glenn Kleckler in the mid-2000s with his grandson, and he kept his promise for 70 years. That's him standing at Harlan Black's grave. He wore that. He went home and tried to give Harlan Black's mother the ring back. And if you read Flags of Our Fathers, the Black family split after Harlan was killed, and she moved to California, and Glenn tried giving that ring back, and she denied it, and did not, from what Glenn said, did not want to be reminded of it. And so he kept that ring on his finger for the rest of his life. And the man was a assistant principal, baseball coach, principal, and never took that ring off, and wore it until he donated it in April of 2009. So and there was a big scenario on that too, in the local newspapers that I was able to find, and they actually what got me into I forgot to, and that's him too. He died on October 6th of 2016. He was the last survivor of the Weslaco 8, and lived a fantastic life. I can think of many guys in my hometown too that were very similar. I mean, to all these guys really, but like just, Glenn Kleckler was very involved with the community. And I mean, I've seen some forums out there that just students loved him as well. And just all these guys were the epitome of America during that time. So next slide, I think we're about close. And this was a picture I took at Harlan's grave when I visited in 2021. And after you've researched, and I'm sure you guys can agree, but after you've researched somebody for so long, and I mean, I was 12 years old when I got into this story. I'm 26 now. And I mean, I needed a moment when I was there. It was a very sentimental experience, I have a lot. I mean, everybody. I can think of many heroes that I have from that war, but these 8 guys, I've loved researching it. And there's, like I said, there's still more I want to do. But it's been a very, very fun project. And there's not enough hours in the day. Like I said, I wanna get it done. But it's been really fun to do. I've really enjoyed it. And then this in 2016, the new identifications came out, and obviously Doc Bradley and Rainey Gagnon are not in there, and they were replaced by Harold Schultz and Harold Keller. That's where the flag raisers sit today, unless somebody finds something new. But I think that this is the thanks to 21st century photo ops, we can see that this is probably how it'll stand for the test of time in terms of photographic evidence. So
yeah, we don't have time to get into it on this episode, but I remember when that story broke, and long story short, somebody had some was appendicitis or kidney surgery, had a long time recovery in a hospital, and was looking through some books, and based on equipment worn in the first flag raising compared to this, that's how they figured it out. Like, wait a minute. So, here's the person that was identified in a different photo 10 minutes before and had on completely different gear. And if it wasn't for the gear and the web belt and the jungle pouch, something along those lines, it was something that basic. Right. That's how they figured it out.
Yeah, and like I said, if I was going to recommend, there's a book out called Investigating EWO, and it was written by the Marine Corps History Division, and that that has all the information. But
and the Marine Corps wasn't quick to jump on the new hypothesis. It took a while before they said, you know what, we think there's something to this.
Nope, and it was good there, and that's my cousin Logan and I. So the original die cast, like you mentioned too, Don, Felix DeWalden's original die cast. Yep. His original die cast, that is at the Marine Military Academy near Harlan Block's grave, and that was Logan and my cousin Logan and I at the day of there. But it was a surreal moment, and like I said, I don't want to keep you on here very much longer, but I want to thank you guys for having me tonight. This was a lot of fun.
Great job, Andrew. Where can people find you, get information on, obviously the book is is still in the works, but people want to get a hold of you, people want to keep track of you, and what social media pages, and where can they find you?
Yeah, so the email on there, andrewbooher10@gmail.com, is the best way for me. So, like I said, I could talk for hours on this, and my goal is to get it published here in the next year or so.
Well, the amount of effort, work, and the fact that your knowledge base, just based off of the cues of this slide, for those of you listening at home, he wasn't, he's just looking at these photos and they're triggering his depth of knowledge on this topic. He wasn't reading some slides or any, he's just looking at these photos and just going from memory. And fantastic job. As always, head to our website, WTSPWorldWar2.com, and I'm going to figure out how to embed this slideshow so you can watch it in real time along as you listen to the episode. And as always, for myself, Dennis Blocker, and Andrew, thank you guys so much, and we will talk to you all in 2 weeks.
This has been a Digital 410 production.